Okay, welcome back to the channel everyone. So I'm currently in Makarska in Croatia and I've had this Honda Africa Twin DCT for the last 4 days, ridden around on the bike, multiple environments. Want to give some of the plus points, the downsides to the bike, and give an overall view of the riding experience. I've had some good experience with it, some not so good. So the plus points, well, it's got this very Dakar rally style outlandish look to it. I quite like that. I think it's a bit of a love-hate. You either love the sort of bright, vibrant colour they've got going on. I particularly like that. Value, the bike is as equipped as a GS, but it's 3 or 4k cheaper than the GS. I think this is about 15, 16, whereas the GS is 18, 19,000. That's in pounds in the UK. The DCT drive, I've found in drive mode is really good around town. Now, people have lambasted drive, saying it under revs the engine feels like it's lugging along, sounds horrible. That is true at higher speeds, but around town, you can't really beat the convenience of having DCT. Now, the other thing about the DCT is it's smooth, so you're less likely to bump heads with the passenger, bump helmets. You're also unable to stall this motorcycle. So if you're doing off-road stuff, that's one of the advantages of DCT. So DCT it actually fits in the plus point column, but also in the negative column. Now let's talk about riding comfort. So the seat I find quite comfortable. It's quite a hard sort of gel substance under there, but I find it quite comfortable for longish rides. I've been on it for about 2 hours. You've got a lot of wind protection on the body. So that's one of the other things about the Adventure Special Edition. You've got increased wind protection and an increased fuel tank, which I'll come on to later. The other thing about it, yep, good wind protection on both the screens, so I didn't get any buffeting or turbulence in the helmet. I got clean air into my helmet, so that this little screen is actually probably better for me. There's also a huge amount of customization on the suspension settings. We've got traditional manual adjustment on the front forks. If you opt for the Adventure Special, you can also get electronic adjustment on the suspension, so you can adjust it on the fly. On this particular bike, round the other side, there's a little knob that allows you to adjust the preload on the rear shock. Now that actually is quite nice to have that down there because it's more accessible than having it actually on the shock and having to get out spanner and adjust it. So that's a really nice feature. One of the other things, you've got a 19, almost 20 litre fuel tank on this bike, which is really, really nice to have. We like that. It means you can go a long way without fueling the vehicle. And as of 2020, they've changed these to be tubeless tyres. So previous Africa Twins actually used tubes, which bugged a few people. The other good thing, on this particular bike, which I think is a 2020, you've got Apple AirPlay, so you've got good connectivity with your phone. And on the newer version, they've added Android Auto. So what you can do is use your phone straight into the mapping unit, the TFT, which is quite a nice TFT. So contrast that with the manufacturer's own navigation systems. You think of BMW, for example. If you're not happy with the way that works, there's not a lot you can do to change it. You're almost stuck with it. Whereas with Android Auto, you can use any app that is compatible with that system. So that's quite nice. Okay, so let's talk about the negatives of the bike. Well, the first and foremost is the absolute mass of the thing. Not only is it heavy, but it's also dimensions are very big. So if you think you had a small garage, not very much space, this bike would be a bit of a pig to fit. The other thing is it leans over really far on the side stand. So we've actually got it balanced on a rock now, so the bike looks half upright. But if you were to put this on its side stand, it leans over almost to the point you think it's going to fall on you, which is a little bit unnerving, should we say, especially with a bike of this size. Let's talk about the bike's actual weight. Well, it's 229 kg in standard form. The DCT adds another 13 kilograms. And then if you go for the Adventure Special, you add another 14, 15 kilograms on top because of the accessories that come with that bike. If you've got pannier frames, you've got crash bars, you've got added features, even the pannier boxes themselves, you're going to be about 250, maybe even north of that in mass of this vehicle. It doesn't also help that the fuel tank's so high up. I find this bike very difficult to maneuver, and I'm not a particularly small guy, pretty much average build, and moving it around is quite hard. So that's one of the real downsides of this bike. That's probably the worst downside with it. It's huge, it's a beast. It's okay when you're on the move, but it's a little bit tricky when you're doing slow maneuvering. Let's talk about control complexity as well. So we've got this instrument cluster here. It is a cluster, it's a bit of a mess. There's just buttons all over the place, functions, favorites, enter key, return. You've got the Bluetooth, and also you've got the controls for the DCT. I've had this bike 3 days. I haven't learned how any of that works. It's a bit fiddly, and I'd also add that the indicator switch on and off is very fiddly. Even with summer gloves, I find it hard to find where the indicator is, just to click that on and off. It's sort of hidden below all this. It's not easy to hit with your thumb. If you had winter gloves on, can you imagine that would be even worse? Okay, so another thing about the bike, when you turn the screen on, people have complained about this. There's this long boot time for the interface to come to life. So you see it says Africa Twin, there's the logo, quite a nice TFT. Then we wait a little bit and the screen eventually throws you this little warning message. You click OK, and then you're into the TFT, ready to set off. Takes a bit of time. The other thing I don't like about it is the engine sounds very clattery. Now this is of course a subjective thing. It's a big twin. I don't really like the way it sounds. It sounds rough. It sounds like a tractor, really. Now some people will like that. I personally like a motorcycle to sound like smooth and nicely revving. I would probably, having had this experience, lean towards more the Triumph with the triple. So it's more of a smoother engine note. The other thing about the DCT, we touched on this earlier, is it's kind of jerky at low speed. So having this bike on the highway is fine, but when you want to do slow speed, turn in the road, or you want to maneuver the bike, DCT can sometimes jerk you like that and catch you out just by using the throttle. You also have to trail brake, so something to learn. Obviously there's no clutch this side. Here is the rear brake as standard. When you're doing slow speed maneuvers, you have to then use the rear brake to trail brake in slow speed maneuvers. I don't really like this. The other thing to note is, I know we're in a very hot climate here, but you have a lot of protection here, but where your legs are, there's a lot of heat coming out from the motor. So I find my lower legs are getting very warm based on the output of the motor. And this didn't happen on the previous version of the Africa Twin, which was the 1000. So the 1100 seems to be a little bit more powerful, so good on that side, but it outputs a lot more heat. We talked about the engine and we talked about the power output of 100 bhp. I personally think it's fine for this category of motorcycle and adventure bike. Some people have complained a little bit that the bike is underpowered, and I suppose it depends what you value in a motorcycle. If you want absolute top performance for an adventure category bike, BMW GS is 140 brake horsepower, this is 100. So there's a big difference. To me, it feels like more than 100 horsepower, but that said, it's low in the numbers in that category. The other thing is, as standard, you don't get that much with the bike. So you don't get any luggage, the heated grips you don't get the center stand, don't get the crash bars. So these things for me make the bike less desirable. The last thing I want to mention is some users have cited reliability and quality control issues with the bike as they've had it a year or two. So we've heard reports of rusty spokes, parts of the frame that have become discolored, and also some people have said that in the clocks there's condensation, so in the instrument cluster here. So I've mentioned some of the pros, some of the cons of this bike. The final question is, would I myself own one? And unfortunately I have to say no, I wouldn't go for it. It's too big and too heavy. It means you have to think about every single maneuver, particularly slow speed, particularly on loose surfaces, slopes. It takes the fun out of motorcycling a little bit to me. The other things about it are probably the price and the complexity of the controls. As far as it looks and its highway performance, very good, but I wouldn't own this bike. So, hope you found that interesting, pros and cons of the Africa Twin. And guys, thanks a lot for listening, and if you enjoy the content, please do drop us a like. And if you really like what we're putting out on the channel, then please do comment below and consider subscribing. Alright, well, thanks a lot for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.